Commander Axton Varus pinched his nose, attempting to stave off the headache that threatened to split his skull like a cheap cantina melon. The ship, the ironically named Resolute, shuddered around him like an old man's last cough. It was a sound he'd gotten used to, like the comforting hum of impending doom. "Varus, you got a minute?" Lieutenant Zella Drake's voice crackled over the intercom, distorted by a static that couldn't be fixed with all the duct tape in the galaxy. "If it's about the coffee rations again, I'll remind you that we're all drinking boiled dirt at this point," Axton replied, not bothering to hide the sarcasm in his voice. Zella's laugh was humorless, a dry rasp that matched the ship's ambience perfectly. "Nah, not this time, it's the engines. We've, kinda lost a few percent more power." "Define few," Axton said, standing up and stretching his legs, which protested with alarming creaks. "Like 10, maybe 15. Depends on how much you like cold showers," Zella replied. "Great," Axton muttered. "At this rate, we'll be heating leftovers on our foreheads." The Resolute, Earth's last great hope, a sleeper ship carrying the frozen dreams of thousands, was less a marvel of human engineering and more a rust bucket with ambitions. It had launched amid much fanfare, trumpets, speeches, the kind of pomp you'd expect for something that wasn't, strictly speaking, a one-way ticket to a forgotten corner of the universe. But what those bright-eyed dreamers back on the ground didn't know was that the Galactic Council had all the enthusiasm of a dead fish when it came to humanity's out-of-bounds exploration. Axton ambled over to the nearest viewport, staring out at the hyperspace rift zone, a swirling vortex of colors that was beautiful in the way a black hole was beautiful. From this distance, it looked like a cosmic whirlpool, eager to swallow their little ship whole. "You think they knew?" Zella asked, appearing at his side, her boots clanking against the worn metal floor. "Knew what? That the Council would slap us with sanctions harder than a reality TV star hitting rock bottom. Doubt it," Axton said, smirking. "We were supposed to be the great explorers, the hope bearers. Turns out we're the intergalactic party crashers. At least we're good at crashing," Zella quipped. She leaned her back against the wall, arms crossed, her expression a mix of curiosity and the kind of resignation that came with long service aboard a ship held together by hope and stubbornness. "You ever wonder if they drew straws back on Earth and we got the short one?" Axton asked. Zella shrugged. "Doesn't matter much now, does it? We're the lucky few who get to wake up in a tin can. Everyone else gets to snooze through the apocalypse." Axton chuckled. "That's the spirit. Keep it grim." The Resolute was a marvel of human ingenuity in the same way a duct-taped boat was a marvel of naval engineering. It creaked, it groaned, and once in a while it made a sound that was suspiciously like a whimper. Yet it carried with it the last flickers of Earth's population, frozen in stasis, dreaming of a world that wouldn't consider their existence a cosmic faux pas. The Galactic Council's sanctions were like a cosmic slap on the wrist, if that wrist was attached to the last hand of humanity reaching out into the stars. They'd been warned, of course, but like any reckless adventurer, they ignored the do not enter signs, hoping for a pot of gold but getting a kettle of cosmic disdain instead. "We could always try diplomacy," Zella suggested, but the grin on her face said she was joking. Mostly. "Oh sure, let's call up the Council, tell them we're sorry for traipsing into their backyard, and offer them a fruit basket," Axton replied. "I'm sure they'll be so moved by our sincerity they'll forget the whole illegal entry thing. Add a bottle of wine and maybe we'll get a pardon," Zella added. Axton nodded. "Yeah, but knowing our luck it'll be boxed wine." The two shared a laugh, the kind born out of desperation, and the understanding that sometimes all you had left was to make jokes in the face of oblivion. "So, what's the plan, fearless leader?" Zella asked, her tone playful but with an edge of seriousness. Axton sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We keep moving, hope the engines don't give out, and pray we find a planet that isn't inclined to eat us. And if the Council finds us first," Zella pressed. "Well, then I hope you brought your best we come in peace speech," Axton replied, turning away from the viewport. Because unless they've got a sudden change of heart, peace is about as likely as me giving up coffee. Zella chuckled. So, never then. Axton glanced around the bridge, sparsely populated with the skeleton crew who were tasked with keeping the Resolute from falling apart before they found their new home. Each of them was hardened, not by choice, but by necessity. You didn't sign up for a mission like this without expecting to lose a few dreams along the way. The comms panel blinked with a new alert, another friendly reminder that they were running low on, well, everything. In case you needed more bad news, Zella said, nodding toward the panel. Just what I was missing, Axton grumbled, tapping the screen. Looks like we might be on emergency rations sooner than expected. Who knew space had so few drive-thrus? Zella quipped. Yeah, no five-star dining in the void, Axton replied. Unless you count the dried protein bars, which I don't. We could always advertise them as slimming aid, Zella suggested. Guaranteed to lose weight when there's nothing to eat. Axton snorted. Maybe we should have gone into marketing instead of space travel. There was a brief silence as they both reflected on their situation, the kind of quiet that wrapped around them like an uncomfortable blanket, reminding them of the stakes. The future of humanity rested on a ship that could fall apart at any moment, in a zone that was as welcoming as a bear trap. You ever think of just turning around? Zella asked softly. Axton shook his head. Can't, too far gone, and besides, what would we be going back to? A planet that rolled the dice and lost, Zella replied. But at least they wouldn't charge us for parking. True, Axton said, smiling despite himself. But I like to think we're out here for a reason. Yeah, trying not to die, Zella said. That's a pretty solid reason. Another silence, this one broken by the distant rumble of the engines, groaning under the pressure of bad decisions and too much optimism. Well, if we're gonna go down, we might as well do it with style, Axton declared, straightening up. Style? Zella arched an eyebrow. Okay, maybe not style, but definitely sarcasm, Axton conceded. Now that's something we can agree on, Zella said with a grin. The Resolute continued its journey through the hyperspace rift zone, a ship full of dreams, jokes, and a dwindling supply of hope. But if there was one thing Axton Varus knew, it was that humanity was nothing if not stubborn. And if the universe thought it could scare them off with a few sanctions and a lousy greeting card, well, it had another thing coming. They might be the last hope for Earth, but by the stars, they were going to make sure that hope went down swinging. Axton Varus watched as a new warning light flashed on the bridge's console, joining its already brightly glowing siblings. The Resolute was beginning to look like a malfunctioning disco ball, and in space, no one could hear you scream, "Turn off that damn light." "What's this one then?" Axton muttered, prodding the flashing annoyance as if a good poke would set things right. "Nope, still blinking. Anyone know if we're taking bets on which system craps out next?" As if on cue, the intercom crackled with the kind of static that could fry an egg. "Commander Varus, you got a sec?" The voice was strained, like someone trying to sound cheerful while standing knee-deep in sewage. "Lyra, if this is a social call, I'm hanging up," Axton replied. "Unless you're calling to tell me we've won a free cruise to somewhere without color-coded panic lights." "Afraid not," Lyra Quell, the ship's engineer and part-time miracle worker, replied. "We've got some issues, do tell," Axton said, leaning back in his chair and motioning for Zella to grab the popcorn. "Seems someone's been busy. We've got signs of sabotage. A bunch of systems have been tinkered with and not in the fix-it-with-gum and hope kind of way." Axton's eyebrows shot up. "Sabotage, huh? And here I thought it was just the universe's way of telling us to screw off." "Wish it were that simple," Lyra said. "But nope. We've got a saboteur on board. Someone's been playing fast and loose with the life support systems. If I didn't know better, I'd say they were trying to turn us into human popsicles." "Well, that's just peachy," Axton grumbled, running a hand through his hair. "Got a suspect list, or are we doing this old school and drawing straws?" "I'm on it," Lyra replied. "I've locked down the affected areas. I'll need to run diagnostics, check logs, see who had access when." "Good. Keep me posted," Axton said, nodding to Zella, who was already on her feet, ready to spread the word that they were officially on high alert. Again. The intercom clicked off, leaving Axton to ponder just how deep this new mess went. It wasn't enough that they were in a ship made of stubborn dreams and spit. Now they had to play detective in the galactic murder mystery of the century. Sabotage, Zella echoed, her voice low. Think it's one of ours, or are we dealing with some cosmic stowaway? Could be either, Axton replied. Might be someone who got cold feet about this whole last hope of humanity gig. Or just someone with a twisted sense of humor, Zella suggested. I mean, who wouldn't want to go down in history as the person who doomed Earth's last survivors? Not exactly a title you'd want on a resume, Axton said. But who are we to judge? Zella shook her head. Looks like we get to play cops and robbers. Fun? Yeah, 'cause we didn't have enough on our plate, Axton replied, standing up and stretching his back with a groan. Let's get everyone together, make sure we're on the same page. Zella nodded, heading off to gather the crew while Axton lingered by the viewport, watching the hyperspace rift zone swirl and undulate like a cosmic lava lamp on steroids. It was beautiful in the way a toothache was beautiful, compelling, but you knew it was going to hurt sooner or later. As the crew trickled into the briefing room, Axton scanned their faces, searching for signs of guilt, or at the very least, a twitchy eye. But they all looked equally worn out, a mix of annoyance and resignation etched into every line and crease. All right, folks, Axton said, clapping his hands together with a cheerfulness he didn't feel. We got a bit of a situation. Seems someone on board decided it'd be fun to play saboteur. A low murmur rippled through the room, a chorus of "What the hell?" and "Are you serious?" rising above the general discontent. Serious as a plasma leak, Axton continued. Lyra's on it, but until then keep your eyes peeled and your hands to yourselves. Anyone sees anything out of the ordinary, you report it. No playing hero, all right. There were nods and a few half-hearted salutes, the kind that suggested a mix of disbelief and simmering frustration. Commander, a voice piped up from the back. It was Terk, a navigator with a penchant for pithy comments and an impressive collection of sarcastic t-shirts. What if the saboteur's already planning their next move? Then we'll catch him, Axton replied. We didn't sign up for this mission 'cause it was easy, folks. We signed up 'cause we're too damn stubborn to quit. So let's put that stubbornness to good use. As the crew dispersed, Axton caught Lyra's eye and gave her a nod, hoping she could work her engineering magic fast enough to keep them all from an early retirement in the depths of space. With the meeting over, Axton and Zella found themselves back on the bridge, scanning the endless readouts for anything that might point to their mystery saboteur. Think it's someone trying to send a message? Zella asked, tapping a finger on the console in a nervous rhythm. Could be, Axton replied. But why not just send a strongly worded letter, you know? This seems a bit extreme. Maybe they like a challenge, Zella suggested, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Or maybe they're just bored. Because nothing says I'm bored like turning off the oxygen, Axton said dryly. Remind me to suggest a new hobby for our culprit once we catch him. Zella chuckled, the sound a brief reprieve from the tension that clung to the ship like a second skin. Maybe knitting. I hear it's very calming, Axton snorted. Yeah, nothing like a good scarf to keep the homicidal tendencies at bay. Their banter was interrupted by the intercom springing to life again, Lyra's voice crackling through with an air of urgency. Got something, Commander. I think I found how they're doing it. Go on, Axton said, leaning forward. Looks like they're using an override code, something that lets them bypass security and tinker with systems unnoticed, Lyra explained. Problem is, this code isn't one of ours. It's not in our logs. Great, so they've got outside help, Axton muttered. Either that or they're a lot smarter than we gave them credit for. Either way, I can set up a trap, Lyra said. If they try to use the code again, we can trace it, see where it's coming from. Do it, Axton ordered. And keep me in the loop. Will do, Lyra replied, her voice crackling out once more. With a plan in motion, Axton finally felt a sliver of hope, a tiny flicker in the oppressive darkness that surrounded them both physically and metaphorically. But it was going to take more than hope to get them through this intact. The hours ticked by with an agonizing slowness, each minute stretching into eternity as Axton and his crew waited for Lyra's trap to spring. The ship was quiet, the kind of silence that made your skin itch as if expecting something to explode at any moment. And then just when Axton thought he'd go mad from the tension, the intercom buzzed again, Lyra's voice thrumming with excitement. "Got him. They've accessed the life support systems again, traced it to engineering." "On my way," Axton replied, practically leaping from his seat. Zella was right behind him as they raced through the ship's corridors, the sound of their boots on metal echoing like a drumbeat of impending confrontation. They burst into engineering to find Lyra hunched over a console, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the finesse of a concert pianist. "There," she said, pointing to a screen that displayed a map of the ship, a blinking dot marking the saboteur's location. "Maintenance tunnels, they're hiding out." "Great," Axton said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Always wanted to play hide and seek in the bowels of a decrepit spaceship." Zella grinned, the thrill of the chase lighting up her eyes. "Better than poker night, right?" "Debatable," Axton replied, but he couldn't deny the adrenaline coursing through his veins. With Lyra guiding them via handheld comms, Axton and Zella made their way to the maintenance access point, weapons drawn and senses on high alert. The tunnel was dimly lit, a labyrinth of tight spaces and forgotten tools, the kind of place where shadows played tricks on the mind. Come out, wherever you are," Zella called, her voice bouncing off the walls in a haunting echo. A rustle of movement caught Axton's attention, and he swung his flashlight toward the noise, revealing a figure crouched in the shadows, eyes wide with a mix of fear and defiance. "Gotcha," Axton said, training his weapon on the saboteur. "Game's over." The figure, young, maybe early 20s with a mop of hair that hadn't seen a comb in months, raised their hands in surrender, an expression of resignation settling over their features. "Why?" Axton demanded, not lowering his weapon. "Why sabotage the ship? You're on it too, you know." The saboteur, who up close looked more like a misguided kid than a villain, shrugged, a hollow laugh escaping their lips. "Does it matter? We're all screwed anyway. Just thought I'd speed things up." Axton felt a pang of something almost like sympathy. "And what, take us all down with you?" "Not on my watch. Just wanted to see if anyone cared enough to stop me," the saboteur said, and there was an unsettling honesty in their voice. "Well, we did," Zella interjected, her tone firm. "And now you're gonna help us fix it." "Fine," the saboteur muttered, lowering their gaze. "Wasn't like I had anything better to do." With the threat contained, Axton and Zella escorted the saboteur back to engineering, where Lyra and the crew set to work reversing the damage. As the ship creaked and groaned its familiar protests, Axton allowed himself a moment of relief. They weren't out of the woods yet, but at least they weren't going down without a fight. And in the cold, inhospitable depths of space, that was about as good as it got. Axton Vara stood on the bridge of the Resolute, feeling like the captain of a ship made from broken promises and half-baked dreams. The cosmic lava lamp outside the viewport mocked him with its swirling colors, a reminder that beauty in space was about as useful as a screen door on an airlock. "Well, that was a fun little detour," Axton commented, leaning back in his chair with the weariness of someone who just realized their life was a sitcom and they were the punchline. "But back to the wonderful world of constant disaster." Zella Drake, his trusty sidekick in this tragicomedy, folded her arms and surveyed the bridge's console. "Aren't you just a ray of sunshine?" "You know me, always the optimist," Axton replied, sarcasm thick in his voice. "So, what do we know?" Zella pointed at the blinking console. "Life support stabilized for now, thanks to our little saboteur, but half the systems are still throwing tantrums like toddlers on a sugar crash." "Great," Axton muttered. As if babysitting a broken ship wasn't enough, now we've got a saboteur with a god complex. "Look on the bright side," Zella said with an ironic smile. "At least we're not bored." Yeah, because in space, boredom's the real killer, Axton replied, rolling his eyes. Remind me to add that to our mission reports. Prevented boredom at all costs. Crew morale high despite impending doom. The intercom crackled to life again, a constant reminder of how much they relied on technology that was about as reliable as a politician's promise. Lyra Quell's voice came through, sounding as chipper as a hangover. "Commander, we've got a problem." "Shocker," Axton replied, rubbing his temples. "Hit me? We've lost primary propulsion," Lyra said, her tone as flat as the Resolute's trajectory. "Secondary systems are holding, but I don't trust them any further than I can throw this ship." "Fantastic," Axton said, sarcasm dripping from every word. "Because a ship that can't move is exactly what we need right now." "I can keep it running on chewing gum and stubbornness for a bit," Lyra continued. "But we've got to fix this, or we'll be as dead in the water as a beached whale." "Right," Axton said. "Because in the grand cosmic ocean we're just a couple of sardines in a leaky tin can." "Hey," Zella chimed in, "don't sell us short. We're more like tuna. Classier than sardines, and we come in olive oil." Despite himself, Axton chuckled. "Well, I guess it's time to put our heads together and see what we can do." They made their way to engineering, where chaos was the order of the day. Lyra was neck-deep in cables and circuits, looking like a mad scientist who'd just been told that her funding was contingent on results. "All right, what's our best option here?" Axton asked, surveying the mess that was their propulsion system. Lyra wiped her forehead, leaving a streak of grease. "Well, we could try rerouting power from non-essential systems. Might give us enough juice to limp along until we find a real fix." "Non-essential," Zella said. "Like the coffee maker." "Please, I'm not a monster," Lyra replied, feigning horror. "I'm thinking more like the entertainment deck." "Ain't like anyone's got time for VR bowling when the ship's falling apart." "True enough," Axton conceded. "All right, let's do it. Get whatever power you can out of those systems and into propulsion. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Lyra nodded, already elbow-deep in the innards of the console. "Consider it done. Though it might mean we're even further in the dark." "Literally," Zella added, glancing at the flickering lights that seemed to be on their union break. Axton sighed, the weight of the universe pressing down on him like an overbearing grandparent. "Let's get to work, then. And pray to whatever cosmic deities that are listening that this buys us enough time." The crew sprang into action, a finely tuned machine of human ingenuity and desperation. Cables were rerouted, circuits reprogrammed, and more than a few choice words were muttered under breath. "Feels like we're living on borrowed time," Zella remarked, tweaking a wire with the precision of a bomb squad technician defusing a nuke. "Borrowed time, unpaid rent," Axton replied. "Call it what you like, we're making it work." "Yeah, but for how long?" Lyra muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Long enough to find a solution," Axton said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Or at least long enough to die trying." Elsewhere on the ship, paranoia was brewing like a bad cup of space coffee. The crew's nerves were stretched thin, and whispers of blame began to echo through the halls like a broken record. "It's gotta be someone close," one crew member suggested in the mess hall, their voice a low hiss. "Someone who knows the ship inside and out." "Or maybe it's someone with a death wish," another replied, swirling their drink like they expected answers to appear in the dregs. Suspicion was a virus spreading faster than they could contain it, and Axton knew that if they didn't find a way to snuff it out, it would tear them apart from the inside. In the meantime, the Resolute limped along, its systems a patchwork quilt of temporary fixes and hopeful dreams. But for all their efforts, it was still a ship on the brink, held together by the sheer stubbornness of its crew. Hours passed, the ship's system stabilized enough to give them a moment's respite. Axton stood in the dim glow of engineering, watching as Lyra and her team worked tirelessly to keep the ship from unraveling. "Think we'll make it?" Zella asked, joining him with a weary smile. Axton shrugged, his optimism as threadbare as their ship's hull. "Hope so. But if not, at least we'll go down swinging." Morbid, but I like it, Zella replied. Let's just hope it doesn't come to that. Yeah, Axton said, watching as Lyra coaxed their stubborn ship to life once more. Here's to hoping. Their reprieve was short-lived. Just as they began to breathe a little easier, the ship shuddered violently as though it had collided with an invisible wall. Axton cursed under his breath, grabbing onto the nearest railing to steady himself. What now? Looks like a power surge, Lyra called out, her fingers dancing over the console with frantic precision. We're pulling too much from auxiliary. Can't win for losing, Axton said, shaking his head. Can we divert anything else? Maybe, Lyra replied. But it's a gamble. Then let's gamble, Axton said, jaw set. It's not like we've got much to lose. As Lyra worked, Axton could feel the ship's pulse like a living thing, struggling to stay afloat in a sea of chaos. It was a reminder of just how fragile their existence was, suspended in the void with nothing but their wits and a stubborn refusal to die. Got it, Lyra said finally, her voice thick with exhaustion. For now, at least. Nice job, Axton said, giving her a nod of approval. Now let's see if we can keep this up. They reconvened on the bridge. The crew gathered once more to assess their situation. Faces were drawn, eyes shadowed with fatigue, but there was a stubborn fire in their expressions, a determination to survive, no matter what the universe threw at them. All right, folks, Axton said, addressing the room with a confidence he hoped was infectious. We've got a long road ahead, but we've proven we can handle whatever's thrown our way. There were murmurs of agreement, heads nodding as the crew rallied together in the face of adversity. Keep your eyes open, Axton continued, his gaze sweeping the room. And remember, we're all in this together. Even if it feels like we're flying by the seat of our pants. A chuckle rippled through the room, a brief moment of levity amidst the tension. It was enough to galvanize them, to remind them why they were here, to fight, to survive, to push back against the uncaring depths of space. The meeting broke up, and Axton lingered on the bridge, staring out at the cosmic expanse. It was beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of their smallness in the grand scheme of things. Think we'll make it? Zella asked, joining him with a tired smile. Maybe, Axton replied. But if not, at least we won't go quietly. As they stood together, watching the universe unfold before them, Axton couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. It was fragile, easily extinguished, but it was there, a testament to their resilience, to their refusal to give up. In the end, that's all that mattered. They were human, flawed, and stubborn, but they were still standing, still fighting, still daring to hope in a universe that seemed determined to break them. And for now, that was enough. The Resolute groaned like an old war horse as it limped through the void, and Axton Varus had the distinct impression that if the ship was a sentient being, it would be flipping them all off right about now. He leaned against the console on the bridge, eyes flicking over the myriad of blinking lights that seemed to be mocking him with their relentless, unsolvable problems. Just another day in the cosmic slums, he muttered to himself, resting his chin on his knuckles. Commander of Earth's last hope, babysitting a glorified tin can with delusions of grandeur. Zella Drake strolled over, her usual ironic grin plastered on her face. She had a knack for finding humor in the darkest situations, like a comedian at a funeral. Cheer up, Axton. At least we haven't spontaneously combusted yet. Give it time, he shot back, though his lips twitched upward. The universe is a patient executioner. Their banter was interrupted by the arrival of Lyra Quell, looking like she'd crawled through a black hole and back, her hair a wild mess and dark rings shadowed her eyes. In one hand, she held a data pad like it was a grenade with the pin pulled. Commander, Lyra began, her tone as flat as weak-cold soda. We've got a bigger issue than the ship falling apart. Fantastic, Axton replied. Lay it on me, nothing surprises me anymore. I found evidence of sabotage, Lyra said, dropping the bomb like it was a casual observation about the weather. Axton straightened up, all trace of humor gone. Sabotage, you sure? She nodded, her expression grim. Yeah. Been going through the logs and system diagnostics. Someone's been messing with our systems, and it's not just a hobbyist hacker. Zella's eyes widened with mock horror. You mean it's not just gremlins in the machinery? There goes my last theory. No, it's more sinister, Lyra replied, eyeing the room as if expecting eavesdroppers. I found traces of code that suggest a covert agent of the Galactic Council might be involved. Axton let out a slow, deliberate breath, the weight of this revelation settling over him like a leaden cloak. Well, isn't that just peachy? Earth sends us off as the last great hope, and someone's decided we're better off dead. It gets better, Lyra continued, her voice a mix of bitterness and exhaustion. Whoever's behind this knows the ship inside and out. They have access to systems only crew members should have. Love a good internal betrayal, Zella quipped. Really keeps you on your toes. Axton rubbed his temples, the pressure building like a storm. We need to find out who it is and fast. Before this saboteur decides to pull the plug on life support or eject us into space. No need to be dramatic, Zella joked, though her eyes betrayed her concern. We'd probably just float around for a bit before freezing solid. Why is it that the only thing keeping us alive is also the thing that's trying to kill us? Axton grumbled. Ironic, really. Space is full of little ironies, Zella said, crossing her arms. Like us being humanity's last hope and having all the competence of a drunk pilot. Focus, you two, Lyra interjected, bringing them back to reality. We need a plan and we need it now. Axton nodded, his mind racing. All right, first things first. We need to unite the crew. No more pointing fingers without evidence. We keep this under wraps until we know more, right? Zella agreed. Because nothing says trust like a little light conspiracy to commit murder. Exactly, Axton said dryly. We need to redirect that paranoia into productivity. Keep their hands busy so they don't have time to start a witch hunt. Lyra glanced at the data pad, then back at the others. I'll keep digging into the logs. See if I can find any more breadcrumbs leading to our mole. And what about the ship? Zella asked, gesturing to the flickering lights, the constant reminder of their precarious situation. We keep patching it up the best we can, Axton replied, and pray it holds long enough to survive this mess. Zella smirked. Praying in a god-forsaken tin can in the middle of nowhere. There's a first. Desperate times and all that, Axton said before turning to Lyra. Keep me posted on what you find, and for the love of all that's holy, try not to blow us up. No promises, Lyra said with a tired smile. But I'll do my best. As they disbanded, Axton couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on his back, the sensation of being watched by some unseen presence. He turned to Zella, who was mirroring his thoughts with a contemplative frown. You think we'll figure it out? She asked, voice low and uncharacteristically serious. I have to believe we will, Axton replied, though the words felt hollow even to him. If not, we might just live up to the name Resolute. Zella chuckled dryly. And here I thought that was just the brand of our stubbornness. They shared a moment of silence, the gravity of their situation sinking in. Out in the vast emptiness of space, trust was as fragile as a soap bubble, and it felt like it was about to pop. The ship settled into an uneasy rhythm, the crew moving with the cautious energy of people on a sinking lifeboat. Axton took the opportunity to address them, gathering the ragtag team in the mess hall, a room that smelled perpetually of burnt coffee and despair. All right, listen up, Axton began, projecting authority even as he felt anything but. We've had some setbacks, but we've also got each other, and that's going to make all the difference. There were murmurs, a mix of skepticism and grudging agreement. Axton pressed on, leaning into his role as reluctant leader. I know there's been talk of sabotage, and I won't deny it, but we need to stick together because whoever's behind this wants us divided. This is starting to sound like a bad motivational speech, Zella whispered to him, barely audible over the crowd. I'm winging it, Axton hissed back, trying not to lose his train of thought. The point is, keep your eyes open, but don't jump to conclusions. We're stronger together, and we've got to trust each other if we're going to make it. There was a moment of silence, then someone in the back shouted, So what do we do if we find the saboteur? Airlock him. Axton winced, but Zella was quick on the uptake. Tempting as that might be, let's try not to add murder to our list of problems. We'll handle it when the time comes, Axton said, trying to keep the peace. For now, focus on what you can control. Keep the ship running, keep your heads clear, and report anything suspicious. The meeting broke up with a murmur of discontent, the crew dispersing to their various stations. Axton watched them go, the heavy weight of leadership pressing down on him like a vice. "Think it'll work?" Zella asked, appearing at his side like a shadow. "Honestly, I have no idea," he admitted. "But it's better than letting them tear each other apart." "Guess we'll find out soon enough," Zella said, her tone light but her expression serious. As they returned to the bridge, Axton tried to focus on the task at hand, burying the gnawing anxiety in the back of his mind. Out here, in the unforgiving backdrop of space, there was no room for doubt. You either made it or you didn't. Lyra joined them a few hours later, her data pad clutched tightly in one hand. She looked worn to the bone, but there was a spark of determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I found something," she said without preamble, her voice a mix of triumph and exhaustion. Axton perked up, the fatigue momentarily forgotten. "What did you find?" Lyra tapped a few keys on her data pad, and a blue holographic display flickered to life, hovering above the table like a ghost. "I traced the sabotage back to a specific terminal. It's in the crew quarters, but the access logs have been wiped clean." "Convenient," Zella remarked, leaning in to study the hologram. "So we're looking for someone who knows how to cover their tracks." "Exactly," Lyra said. "But there's something else. I found a message buried in the code, a taunt almost. It's like they're daring us to catch them." Axton felt a chill creep down his spine, though he tried to mask it with bravado. "Well, I'd hate to disappoint our mystery saboteur. Let's see if we can turn the tables on them." "What's the plan then?" Zella asked, her eyes glinting with the thrill of the chase. "We set a trap," Axton replied, the pieces slotting into place in his mind. "We monitor the terminals, see if they slip up, and when they do, we'll be ready." "Sounds risky," Lyra said, though there was a hint of admiration in her tone. "But we're running out of options." "Risky is my middle name," Axton quipped, though he couldn't fully suppress his nerves. "I thought it was barely functional," Zella shot back with a smirk. "Depends on the day," Axton replied, a grin tugging at his lips despite everything. As they set the plan in motion, Axton felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were up against the odds, but they were fighting back. They were the resolute, and they weren't going down without a fight. In the quiet moments that followed, as the ship drifted through the void like a weary ghost, Axton found himself staring out into the vastness of space. It was a harsh and unforgiving place, but there was beauty in its brutality, a reminder of why they were here. "Think we'll pull through?" Zella asked, breaking the silence. Axton considered the question, then nodded. "We'll make it, one way or another." "Didn't take you for an optimist," Zella said, her tone teasing. "It's not optimism," Axton replied, a fierce determination in his voice. "It's stubbornness." And in that moment, as the stars wheeled silently overhead, Axton felt the stirrings of hope. Fragile, yes, but enough to keep them moving forward. Enough to keep fighting, to keep surviving, to keep hoping for a better tomorrow. And for now, that was enough. The Resolute hummed with a tension that could make a string quartet out of a bunch of rusty bed springs. An eerie kind of quiet settled over the ship, the kind that makes you feel like the universe is holding its breath, just waiting for something to go catastrophically wrong. Which, aboard this tin can, it more often than not did. Axton Varus stood on the bridge, his eyes glued to the console like a man staring down the barrel of a bad decision. The screen was an epileptic's nightmare, blinking reds and yellows that screamed about engines, life support, and a laundry list of other things you'd typically want functioning on a spaceship. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to work out how to fix a ship held together by duct tape, hope, and spit. "Any bright ideas, Captain?" Zella Drake's voice cut through his thoughts like a buzzsaw through a marshmallow. She lounged against the bulkhead, arms crossed, projecting an air of casual indifference that only the truly worried can pull off. "Yeah, I'm thinking we should start charging admission," Axton replied, turning to face her. Call it the perilous journey to the afterlife tour. We'll make a killing, Zella snorted, a half-smile tugging at her lips. You know, if there's one thing I didn't expect from space travel, it was the constant threat of violent decompression. Really adds a little zest to the daily grind. Careful, Axton warned. You wouldn't want to jinx it. As if on cue the ship shuddered, the kind of deep, unsettling groan that suggested the Resolute was considering a career change to space debris. Axton and Zella exchanged a glance that said, "Yep, we're screwed." "Speaking of zest," Zella said, "Lyra's got something. Said it was important." "Let's hope it's not another death threat," Axton muttered, making his way to the comms system. It was a miracle the ancient intercom hadn't exploded from sheer frustration yet. "Lyra, this is Axton. What have you got?" he asked, the line crackling with static and the ghosts of communication past. Lyra's voice came through, tinny but urgent. "Axton, we've got a problem. Bigger than we thought." "Well, that's just fantastic," Axton said, rubbing his temples, "because I was worried things were going too smoothly." "Meet me in the engine room," Lyra said, sounding more like a plea than an order. "It's urgent." Axton glanced at Zella. "I suppose we should go see what fresh hell awaits us." "Lead on, Captain," Zella replied with mock enthusiasm. After all, it's not like we have anything else to worry about. The trek to the engine room was a journey through a ship protesting its own existence. Panels hung loose, wires dangled like limp noodles, and the lighting flickered with all the reliability of a politician's promise. Axton had seen haunted houses with better upkeep. Lyra was waiting for them when they arrived, her face a mixture of exhaustion and grim determination. She held the data pad like it was a talisman against the looming catastrophe. "We have a problem," she repeated, pointing to the holographic display hovering above the table. "We always have a problem," Zella said dryly. "The question is, how likely is this one to kill us?" Lyra ignored the comment, zooming in on a series of schematics. "The sabotage is worse than I thought. It's not just the engines. The whole ship's been rigged to fail." Axton felt a chill settle in his bones. It was one thing to be on a dying ship, but to know someone had put it on life support and then left it to rot was a special kind of hell. "Any bright ideas on who our friendly neighborhood saboteur might be?" Lyra shook her head. "Not yet, but I've narrowed it down to a handful of crew members with access." "So, what you're saying is, we might be sharing a bunk with the person who's trying to kill us," Axton said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Good to know. The ship's systems are degrading faster than anticipated," Lyra continued. "If we don't find a way to fix it, we'll be stranded in this rift with no way out." "Sounds like a party," Zella remarked, leaning over the schematics. "So, what's the plan, O fearless leader?" "First, we need to stabilize the engines," Axton replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Then we figure out a way to flush out our saboteur before they can finish the job." "Easy as pie," Zella said with a smirk. "By which I mean impossible, of course." "Yeah, well, I'm not ready to go quietly into that good night just yet," Axton said. "Let's get to work." As the trio set about their tasks, the ship continued its slow crawl through the rift, the swirling colors outside a constant reminder of how thoroughly screwed they were. The rift was a place of chaos, where the laws of physics took a vacation, and reality played fast and loose with the rules. It was beautiful in a nightmarish sort of way, like a painting done by an artist on the verge of a mental breakdown. Lyra busied herself with the schematics, her fingers flying across the data pad as she searched for a way to undo the saboteur's handiwork. Axton and Zella set to work on the engines, the room filled with the acrid scent of burning circuits and shattered hopes. "So," Zella said as she pulled a panel loose, revealing a tangle of wires that looked more like a rat's nest than a piece of advanced technology. "How do you think our illustrious saboteur plans to finish us off? Slow suffocation, quick decompression, probably whichever's more inconvenient," Axton replied, wrestling with a particularly stubborn piece of machinery. "This ship's falling apart faster than my last relationship." Zella chuckled, though it was more bitter than amused. "Honestly, I can relate." It's like we're trapped in a cosmic joke and we're the punchline. Well, if we're the punchline, Axton grunted, let's make sure we get the last laugh. It was then that the ship shuddered again, a violent convulsion that sent tools and loose components flying. Axton grabbed onto the nearest handhold, cursing under his breath. What the hell was that? Lyra's voice came over the intercom, though it was fractured by static. Axton, we have a problem. There's a systems failure. Life support. Engines. What do you mean life support? Zella shouted, her voice rising above the din. That's not just a problem, that's an extinction-level event. The intercom crackled ominously, Lyra's voice barely audible. Trying to stabilize, but we're losing power fast. Someone needs to get to the backup generator. On it, Axton snapped, shooting Zella a look. Can you keep things together here? She nodded, her expression serious for once. I'll do my best. Just don't take too long. I prefer breathing. Axton gave her a grim smile before sprinting for the corridor, the ship's persistent groans echoing around him like a haunted symphony. He moved with urgency, driven by the knowledge that every second counted. The corridors were deserted, the rest of the crew likely scrambling to hold the ship together with their bare hands. Axton could feel the ship's heartbeat slowing, the life support systems wheezing like an asthmatic marathon runner. Reaching the generator room, he threw open the door and skidded to a halt, his brain taking a moment to process the scene before him. The backup generator was in worse shape than a politician's morals, wires sparking angrily and coolant leaking like a drunk after last call. "Damn it," Axton muttered, rushing to the console. He punched in a series of commands, trying to reroute power and stabilize the system. It was a delicate operation, like performing open-heart surgery with a rusty spoon. As he worked, the ship's lights flickered, casting shadows that danced like specters on the walls. Axton's hands moved with practiced precision, but his mind was a chaotic swirl of thoughts. If they couldn't get the power back online, they'd be left adrift in the rift, a ghost ship crewed by the damned. The saboteur might as well have signed their death certificates, and all Axton could do was try to scribble a return to sender across it. The generator sputtered and coughed, a child throwing a tantrum. Axton muttered a few choice words, giving the console a firm thump. Miraculously, the lights steadied, and he felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. "Come on, you stubborn bastard," he coaxed, flipping switches and adjusting dials. "You're not going to die on me, not today." Sweat dripped down his forehead as he worked, the air in the room stifling and oppressive. Each passing moment was an agony, time dragging its feet like a petulant child. Finally, the generator roared to life, a triumphant bellow that reverberated through the ship. Axton let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease ever so slightly. "All right, Resolute," he breathed, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Let's see if we can pull your sorry ass back from the brink." He made his way back to the engine room, the ship still shivering like a dog in a thunderstorm. Zella was elbow-deep in the guts of a control panel, her expression one of fierce concentration. "Welcome back," she said without looking up, her hands a blur of motion. "How's our life support looking?" "Stable for now," Axton replied, crouching next to her. "But it's not going to hold forever. We need to find our saboteur and fast." "Lovely," Zella said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because we didn't have enough on our plate already." "I'm starting to think this ship hates us," Axton said, resigning himself to their fate with the resignation of a man who's seen too much and survived too little. "Yeah, but the feeling's mutual," Zella shot back with a smirk. Despite the chaos, the banter brought a flicker of warmth to Axton's chest. It was a small comfort in the face of overwhelming odds, but he'd take whatever he could get. As they worked side by side, Axton couldn't help but wonder if they'd find out who was behind the sabotage before it was too late. It was a grim thought, but in the vast emptiness of space, hope was a fragile thing, easily snuffed out by the cold, uncaring void. For now, all they could do was fight, survive, and maybe, just maybe, make it out the other side. As Axton and Zella continued their grim task, the ship's intercom crackled to life again, Lyra's voice cutting through the static like a rusty knife. "Axton, I've got an idea. It's dangerous as hell, but it might just work." "Those are my favorite types of plans," Axton replied, wiping his greasy hands on his already filthy jumpsuit. "What's on your mind?" Lyra's hologram flared to life, her expression a mix of excitement and worry. "The hyperspace rift. It's chaotic, unpredictable, and generally a nightmare, but it also holds an enormous amount of energy. If we can harness even a fraction of it, we can power up the ship, stabilize the systems, and maybe even get out of this mess." Zella raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched across her face. "So, we're going to siphon energy from a swirling cosmic death trap. Sounds safe." Axton sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I think we're beyond safe at this point." "Tell us what you need, Lyra." "We'll have to reconfigure the plasma conduits to channel the rift energy directly into our reserves," Lyra explained, her fingers dancing across the data pad. "It's risky, but given the alternative, I'll take risky over certain death any day." "That's the spirit," Zella said with a smirk. "Plus, nothing like a little impending doom to spice up a dull Tuesday." Axton nodded, his mind racing. "All right, let's get the crew together. We'll need all the hands we can get." The intercom buzzed like an angry insect, and soon the ship's beleaguered crew trickled into the engine room, their expressions a mix of determination and resignation. Axton stood before them, trying to channel some semblance of leadership despite the chaos around him. "Listen up, everyone," he began, making eye contact with each weary face. "We find ourselves in quite the predicament. We're drifting through a hyperspace rift with a saboteur on board, systems failing, and a one-way ticket to hell." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Gallows humor, the true universal language. "We've got a plan courtesy of Lyra," Axton continued. "It's risky, but it might just get us out of this spiral of disaster. We're going to harness the rift's energy. Crazy, right? But if we pull it off, we might just save our sorry hides." There was a murmur of uncertainty, but Axton could see a flicker of hope in their eyes. Desperation was a powerful motivator. "Axton, you sure this isn't just another one of your harebrained schemes?" piped up Drax, the ship's engineer with a penchant for pessimism. "If it were, Drax, I'd have already set the ship on fire for the insurance money," Axton replied with a crooked grin. "This one's different. We either try something crazy or we wait for the ship to become our space coffin." "Your choice." The crew exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. They were in, and if they were going to go down, they'd do it fighting. "All right, people," Axton said, clapping his hands together. "Let's get to work. Lyra, take the lead on the conduit reconfiguration. Zella, coordinate with the rest of the crew. Drax, keep an eye on those engines. I want everyone to know what they're doing and why. No room for mistakes." As the crew dispersed, Axton allowed himself a moment of optimism. It was fleeting, like the last beer at a party, but it was there. Zella sidled up to him, her usual smirk replaced with a look of genuine concern. "You really think this'll work?" "About as much as I believe in Santa Claus," Axton replied. "But sometimes you have to bluff your way through." "Spoken like a true gambler," Zella said, her smirk returning. "Just remember, house always wins." "Not if we burn it down first," Axton retorted, rolling up his sleeves and heading to join Lyra. The ship's corridors buzzed with activity as the crew set about their tasks, each person moving with a sense of purpose. Axton couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. The Resolute may have been on its last legs, but its crew was far from beaten. He found Lyra at the main conduit access point, tools spread out around her like a mechanic's buffet. Her intense focus was a testament to her skill, and Axton was grateful to have her on the team. "Need a hand?" he asked, crouching down beside her. Lyra glanced up, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "Only if you're ready to get your hands dirty," Axton laughed, picking up a wrench. "Pretty sure that's in the job description." As they worked, patching wires and adjusting circuits, Axton couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. It was an itch at the back of his mind, a whisper of paranoia that refused to be silenced. "Hey, Lyra," he said casually, "you think our mystery saboteur knows what we're up to?" "Probably," she replied, not looking up from her work. "But if they want to stop us, they'll have to do it in person. Sabotage is one thing, but confronting an entire crew is another." "Let's hope you're right," Axton said, tightening a bolt with more force than necessary. The minutes ticked by, the ship's groans a constant reminder of their precarious situation. It was like trying to repair a sinking ship with duct tape and wishful thinking. Finally, Lyra sat back, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "That's it. The conduits are reconfigured. Now we just need to initiate the energy transfer." "Good," Axton said, standing up and stretching his cramped muscles. "Let's get back to the bridge and see if we can make this thing fly." They made their way through the ship, the crew's efforts a testament to human resilience in the face of disaster. It was a ragtag group, but they were damn good at what they did. As they reached the bridge, Axton couldn't help but feel a pang of anxiety. This was it, the moment of truth. Either they'd pull off a miracle or they'd become a footnote in the annals of space exploration. "Everyone ready?" he asked, looking around at his crew. The nods were grim but determined. Lyra took her place at the console, her fingers hovering over the controls. "Here goes nothing," she muttered, initiating the transfer sequence. The ship shuddered, the lights dimming momentarily before flaring back to life. It was a jolt, like the first sip of coffee in the morning, sharp, bracing, full of potential. "Energy levels stabilizing," Lyra reported, her voice tight with concentration. "But we need more. The rift's energy is like a wild beast, we have to tame it." "Come on, Resolute," Axton muttered under his breath, willing the ship to hold together. The seconds stretched like taffy, each one a lifetime unto itself. Axton watched the readings, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. "Almost there," Lyra said, her voice a strained whisper. "Just a little more." The ship groaned, a deep, resonant sound like a leviathan awakening from slumber. The lights flickered, then steadied, bathing the bridge in a pale, eerie glow. "We've got it," Lyra exclaimed, a note of triumph in her voice. "Energy transfer complete and systems are stabilizing." A cheer erupted from the crew, a sound of relief and exhilaration. It was a small victory, but in the endless void of space, small victories were everything. Axton allowed himself a moment to breathe, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Nice work, everyone," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Now let's see if we can keep this bucket of bolts flying." "Still got a saboteur to deal with," Zella reminded him, her eyes scanning the bridge for any signs of treachery. "Yeah," Axton agreed, his expression hardening. "And now that we've got a little breathing room, it's time to flush them out." Lyra nodded, her gaze steely. "I've been going over the access logs. I've narrowed it down to 3 suspects, each one with the opportunity to sabotage the ship." "Then let's have a little chat with them," Axton said, a wolfish grin spreading across his face. "Time to remind them that while the Resolute might be a mess, its crew is far from helpless." As the crew went about their tasks with renewed vigor, Axton couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. The ship might be held together with gum and desperation, but its crew had proven they were made of sterner stuff. The Resolute might have been launched as Earth's last great hope, but it was the people on board who truly defined its mission. In the vast emptiness of space, they'd found something worth fighting for, each other. Now all they had to do was survive long enough to make it count. The Resolute hummed with the barely contained enthusiasm of a ship that had just cheated death. Again, Axton Varus was standing on the bridge, looking out into the swirling chaos of the hyperspace rift, feeling like a man who had won at least half of a lottery. The other half was figuring out which one of his crew had been trying to sabotage them all along. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Zella Drake sidled up next to him, her voice carrying that familiar lilt of gallows humor, like a hangover without the fun night before. "Yeah," Axton replied, rubbing a hand over his stubbled chin. "Like we just punched a black hole in the face and lived to tell about it. How's that for a Tuesday?" "Better than most," she said, folding her arms. "Especially if your Tuesdays include avoiding certain death." The bridge was alive with the buzz of activity. Lyra Quell was still hunched over the console, eyes flicking between screens like a DJ at a particularly existential rave. The rattling of the Resolute might have finally ceased, but the ship still felt like a particularly grumpy old man being roused from his nap. "So," Zella continued, a mischievous glint in her eye, "now that we've turned mad science into a temporary cure for engine failure, what's next? A little saboteur hunting." Axton nodded, his grin wolfish and sharp. "Exactly. We've got a couple of names thanks to Lyra's detective work. Let's see who's been making our lives a living hell." Zella gave him a mock salute. "I've got the perfect interrogation playlist." Heavy on the existential dread. Axton chuckled, but it was a humorless sound, more a croak than a laugh. "Yeah, let's see how they like being on the other side of the anxiety equation." As they moved towards the crew quarters, Axton tried to recall any suspicious behavior from the past few weeks. But then again, when wasn't behavior on the Resolute suspicious? Between Lyra's techno-babbling, Zella's cavalier attitude, and Drax's constant grumbling, they were all guilty of acting like a bunch of spacefaring lunatics. Drax met them halfway, his expression a masterpiece of skepticism. "Let me guess," he grumbled. "You want me to charm them into confessing." "Your charm is more like a blunt instrument," Zella quipped. But yeah, something like that. They gathered in the mess hall, which in its current state looked like it had just survived a food fight between toddlers and a hurricane. Axton stood at the head of the table, eyes scanning the faces of his crew. Most of them looked back with expressions of wary curiosity, but 3 pairs of eyes darted away at the same moment. Bingo! Axton cleared his throat. "All right, folks. As much as I'd love to chalk up our ship's recent fails to cosmic bad luck, we all know that's a load of space junk. We have a saboteur on board." A murmur swept through the group, a ripple of anxiety mixed with outrage. "But thanks to Lyra's handiwork," he continued, nodding toward her, "we've narrowed it down to 3 suspects." Zella leaned forward, a gleam of anticipation in her eyes. "Time to play everyone's favorite game, Who Wants to Be a Traitor?" Lyra stepped up, her data pad glowing ominously. "First up, we've got Captain Grumpy himself, Drax. Motive, constantly complaining about how much he hates space travel." Drax's eyes widened in indignation. "Hey, I may whine, but I'd rather die in space than owe anyone on Earth a favor." "That's the spirit," Axton said dryly. "Next, second suspect," Lyra went on, "is Renee, our lovely communications officer who just so happened to have access to the intercom logs at every critical moment." Renee looked up sharply, her face a mask of surprise. "I was rerouting communications from Earth. You know, trying to get us help. Maybe help to the nearest gulag," Zella muttered. "And last but not least," Lyra concluded, "we've got Kevin, who seems to have a penchant for disappearing at the most inconvenient times." Kevin's face flushed red. "I was fixing the life support system. You try doing that while holding your bladder." Axton raised a hand for silence. All right, I'm not here to pass judgment. Yet. But we need to keep this crew united if we're going to survive the next hyperspace jump." "You sure we want to jump again?" Drax asked. "Resolutes held together with more wishful thinking than actual engineering at this point." "If we don't," Axton pointed out, "we'll be stuck here forever, and I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of the decor." A few tense chuckles rippled through the mess hall. "Here's the deal," Axton continued. "We'll keep an eye on each other, but we can't let our paranoia tear us apart. We need each other more now than ever." "What about the Council's agent?" Zella asked, her voice low. "You know they're out there ready to swoop in." "Right," Axton said with a tight smile. "That's where we turn our little setback into an advantage." "How?" Lyra asked, genuinely curious. "We play them at their own game," Axton replied, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "We bargain." "Bargain with what?" Drax demanded. "A broken ship and our charming personalities." "Exactly," Axton said. "Earth might be a mess, but it's our mess. And we know it better than anyone. We leverage what we've got. Our knowledge, our resilience. Make them see we're not just a bunch of stranded nobodies." "Feels like a stretch," Zella remarked, leaning back in her chair. "But hell, what have we got to lose?" "Nothing but our dignity," Axton said with a shrug. And we lost that several light years ago. As the crew slowly disbanded, each member wearing their own mask of determination or doubt, Axton felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had a plan, albeit a risky one, but at least it was something. Zella lingered, her expression thoughtful. You really think we can outwit the council? Axton gave her a wry smile. We're humans, Zella. We specialize in making the impossible just slightly improbable, she laughed, a genuine sound that cut through the tension like a knife. All right, Captain. Let's see if we can bluff our way to salvation. The next few hours were a blur of preparation and strategy. The Resolute systems, shaky as they were, had been stabilized enough for Axton to reach out to the Galactic Council. Now came the tricky part, negotiating their future with an entity that didn't particularly care if their ship lived or died. As Axton stood in front of the comms array, he took a deep breath, feeling the weight of countless decisions resting on his shoulders. This was it, the make-or-break moment. Council, this is Captain Axton Varus of the Resolute, he began, his voice steady and firm. We're requesting an audience regarding our current predicament. A pause, pregnant with potential doom, followed by a crackle of static. And then a voice, smooth, authoritative, and just a smidge condescending. This is the Galactic Council representative. State your business, Captain Varus. Axton swallowed, locking eyes with Lyra, who gave him an encouraging nod. We've encountered a hyperspace rift and managed to harness its energy to survive. However, we're in need of assistance for further stabilization. And why should the Council aid a rogue Earth vessel? The voice replied, dripping with skepticism. Because, Axton replied, channeling every ounce of bravado he could muster, Earth has potential you'd be remiss to ignore. We're a resourceful bunch, capable of achieving the impossible with practically nothing. Just imagine what we could do with a little support. A low hum buzzed through the line, the council representative considering his words. And, Axton added, we've got some rather interesting data from the hyperspace rift. Data I'm sure would be of interest to those inclined toward exploration and expansion. Silence stretched, Axton's heart pounding like a runaway train. This was the moment of truth. You make a bold claim, Captain Varus, the voice finally responded. We will consider your offer. In the meantime, maintain your position. Further instructions will follow. Axton cut the transmission with a relieved sigh, slumping back in his chair. Well, that's done, he muttered. Now we wait. You think they'll bite? Lyra asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. They'd be fools not to, Axton replied, though he wasn't entirely convinced himself. Zella clapped him on the back. Well, Captain, you've either saved us or doomed us. Let's hope your sales pitch was as good as you think. Axton chuckled, a sound that held more nerves than humor. Either way, I think we've given them something to think about. As the crew went about their tasks, preparing for whatever might come next, Axton felt a strange sense of calm. They'd done all they could for now. The rest was in the hands of fate, or the council, which seemed equally capricious. But regardless of what happened next, the Resolute and her crew had proved one thing beyond doubt. They were survivors. And in the vast, uncaring void of space that meant everything. And if the council didn't see that, well, Axton thought with a wry smile, they could always try their hand at piracy. After all, they'd had plenty of practice living on the edge. The Resolute drifted in the void of space, held together by duct tape, prayers, and that old standby, denial. Axton Varus, captain of this glorified tin can, stood on the bridge, staring out into the black. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, not because things were looking up, but because the universe hadn't spat in his face for at least 5 minutes. Dare I say it, said Zella Drake, sauntering onto the bridge with her usual swagger, things might actually be turning around. Careful, Axton warned, tempt fate like that and next thing you know we'll be space dust. Zella shrugged. If we're lucky, but hey, I just heard from Lyra. Looks like the council bought your pitch about Earth's potential and all that jazz. Axton chuckled. Humanity's always been good at selling snake oil. Might as well sell it to the stars, too. Just then the intercom crackled, and Lyra Quell's voice cut through the static, as smooth as silk wrapped around a blade. "Captain, the Council's sent word. They're lifting the sanctions. Earth's back in the galactic good books." Axton let out a whoop, drawing curious glances from a couple of passing crew members. "Well, I'll be damned. Looks like we pulled it off." "Don't start celebrating just yet," Lyra continued. "They're sending a liaison to assist with our operations. Probably just a fancy way of saying they're gonna babysit us for a while." "Babysitter or not," Axton replied, "at least we won't be the galaxy's pariahs anymore. And maybe we'll get some decent coffee out of the deal. Or at least coffee that doesn't taste like it's been brewed from old socks," Zella quipped. As the news spread throughout the ship, a palpable sense of relief mingled with the ever-present tension. The crew had been living on a knife's edge for too long. The prospect of rejoining the galactic community was a balm to their weary souls, even if it came with strings attached. In the mess hall, the crew gathered to toast their small victory with rations that were only slightly less bland than usual. Axton stood at the center, raising a cup of what might generously be called tea. "Here's to us," he proclaimed. "A bunch of space misfits proving that humanity can still be a royal pain in the ass, even amongst the stars." The crew chuckled and raised their cups, though the laughter carried a note of exhaustion. They'd come through a hell of an ordeal. It was only natural to feel the weight of it. Drax, looking a shade less grumpy than usual, leaned back in his chair. "So, Captain, what's next? We still got a ship to fix and a saboteur to deal with." "True enough," Axton replied, "but at least now we're not doing it on our own. And speaking of our saboteur, we've got some new leads to follow up on." Zella leaned in, her eyes gleaming with that familiar mischievous light. "Oh, I love a good witch hunt. Who's our new prime suspect?" Axton gestured to Lyra, who tapped a few keys on her datapad, bringing up a holographic display of the ship's systems. "I've been digging through the logs again," she explained. "And I found something interesting in the plasma conduits. Someone's been tampering with the energy flow." "Sabotage 101, Zella muttered. "Any chance we can trace it back?" Lyra nodded. "Already done. Whoever it was, they weren't as clever as they thought. I've narrowed it down to a specific terminal, and I've got a lovely little trap set up." The crew exchanged glances, a mix of anticipation and suspicion. It was one thing to know there was a traitor in their midst. It was another to finally be closing in on them. "All right," Axton said, "let's set the trap and see who takes the bait, but no jumping to conclusions, all right? We don't want to be the ones throwing innocent people out the airlock." "Speak for yourself," Drax grumbled. "An airlock's looking mighty appealing these days." Zella snorted. "Only if you go first, Drax." As the crew dispersed to prepare for their sting operation, Axton lingered for a moment, letting the hum of the ship settle around him. It was a sound he'd come to associate with more than just the Resolute's battered systems. It was the heartbeat of his crew, flawed and fragile but still alive. "Hey, Captain!" Lyra's voice broke through his reverie. She was standing by the door, a small smile playing on her lips. "We did good today," Axton nodded. "Yeah, we did. Just got to keep doing good for a little bit longer." "You think we'll ever get back to Earth?" she asked, a hint of longing in her voice. "Maybe," Axton replied. "And if not, we'll make do out here. We've proved we can handle it." Lyra grinned. "Humanity, making do since the dawn of time." "Damn right," Axton said. "And we'll keep doing it until the stars burn out." The plan was simple. Monitor the terminal, catch the saboteur, and then try not to throttle them before getting some answers. Zella, as always, volunteered to be the one sitting in the darkened corner, ready to pounce. "Why do you always get the fun jobs?" Kevin whined as they set up the surveillance equipment. "Because I've got the right mix of charm and menace," Zella replied with a wink. "Now, shoo, I've got a rat to catch." As Kevin left, muttering something about unfair divisions of labor, Zella settled in, her eyes fixed on the terminal. She'd always enjoyed the hunt, whether it was tracking down a missing part or sniffing out a traitor. There was something satisfying about it, a puzzle to be solved. Hours drifted by, each tick of the clock stretching patience to its limit. But just as Zella was contemplating a nap, movement caught her eye. A shadowy figure slinked into view, glancing nervously over their shoulder before approaching the terminal. Zella's heart thudded with an adrenaline-fueled rhythm. She hit a button on her comms, alerting Axton and the others. "Got a live one, folks, moving in for the catch." As she crept forward, she couldn't help the grin that spread across her face. Whoever this was, they'd picked the wrong ship to mess with. With a swift motion, Zella lunged, tackling the figure to the ground. "Gotcha!" she exclaimed triumphantly, pinning them in place. The lights flickered on, revealing a wide-eyed Renee, the communications officer. "Renee," Zella said, surprise coloring her voice. "What the hell are you doing?" Renee's eyes darted back and forth, panic evident. I was just trying to reroute some power. I swear I'm not the saboteur." Axton and Lyra arrived, taking in the scene with varying degrees of disbelief. "Looks like we've caught our rat," Lyra said, though her tone was more curious than accusatory. "Why don't you tell us what's really going on, Renee?" Axton suggested, his voice calm but firm. Renee swallowed hard, visibly trembling. I was just trying to divert some energy to the comms systems. I've been trying to reach out to some old contacts, see if they could help us." "And you didn't think to mention this earlier?" Lyra asked, raising an eyebrow. Renee's expression turned defiant. "With all the paranoia and finger-pointing going on, can you blame me?" Axton sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right. Let's get you up and figure this out. If she's telling the truth, then this isn't our saboteur." As they helped Renee to her feet, Zella shrugged. "Guess the hunt continues. Shame, too. I was looking forward to an airlock party." Back on the bridge, Axton rubbed the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache coming on. They were so close, yet the truth remained frustratingly out of reach. "All right," he said, addressing the gathered crew, "let's regroup and figure this out." "We're not done yet." Drax crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "You sure this isn't just another wild goose chase, Captain?" Axton met his gaze evenly. "Maybe it is, but I'm not giving up until we find the real culprit." As the crew continued their investigation, a new sense of determination took hold. They'd come too far to let this slip through their fingers. And if they had to turn every bolt, check every conduit, and question every crew member, well, so be it. In the end, the Resolute was more than just a ship. It was their home, and they were damn well going to protect it. With a renewed sense of purpose, the crew dove back into the task at hand, each member playing their part in unraveling the tangled web of sabotage and deceit. And though the road ahead was fraught with challenges, one thing was clear. Together, they could weather any storm the galaxy hurled their way. Axton felt it in his bones. The Resolute's crew was a force to be reckoned with, and they'd be damned if they let a little thing like sabotage ruin their day. Because out here in the vast, uncaring void, the only thing that really mattered was each other. And that, Axton mused, was something even the universe couldn't take away.